All right. Well, hello everyone. This is a supplemental video for my homily for the fifth Sunday of Lent. So I just posted that a day or so ago, and this was actually a message I really wanted to flesh out a little bit more. I was a little out of time, but I wanted to have a personal anecdote for that message, and aside from the fact that I was really at time anyway, I actually wrote two different anecdotes, and they were both just a little too niche, a little too specific for the Sunday. But I wanted to lump them both together and make a supplementary video out of it. So if you haven't seen the other video, basically, very short version, as I was talking about, we should never be political extremists. We should never be anything extremist. That's a lack of humility. It's a lack of love and compassion for the people you're speaking to. So we absolutely have the right and obligation to express our views, our beliefs, our opinions, concerns, frustrations, etc., but never in an abusive, attacking kind of mode. And so, on that note, one of the things I wanted to squeeze in for the Sunday, which I just couldn't, what happens if you do tend to mistreat other people from time to time? What happens when you get too passionate or opinionated for your own good and say something that you end up regretting? We've all been there. Well, I think for a start, it's just good to recognize that we don't want to be those people. That doesn't literally solve the problem. Obviously, it's much more complicated than that. But it's the start. It is the beginning of the process to at least acknowledge that we don't want to be abusive people who go on the attack whenever our beliefs or opinions are on the line. And there's a game out there. I'm playing video games most of my life. A game that I very much enjoyed, Dragon Age Inquisition. I mean, it's got Inquisition in the name. I've got to love it, right? Well, there was one scene that I thought was actually really meaningful for me, and it folds into what I was trying to talk about yesterday, in that it's a fantasy game, Dragon Age, fantasy. So in this world, only women are entered into the clerical state. And at one point in the story, you're in a position where your character gets to choose who gets to be the new Lady Pope. Like, you don't literally elect her in, but you basically have the power to propose the candidate that will certainly get voted into the position. So you have the chance to choose who gets to be the next Lady Pope, and you basically have two options. Your first option is your spy master, who used to be a nun, so she believes in God very much. But she's also an expert manipulator, and she sees the position as ways that she can advance her information and all of that fun spy stuff. So basically, she's really become your spy master in every way. She's really accepted that life to the point where if she becomes the most powerful person in the church, she sees that as an opportunity to grow in her power. And your other option is a shield maiden, basically. That's not what they call her in the game. I'm simplifying the term. So my apologies for any inaccuracies I'm saying here. I'm not trying to do it. I'm just trying to keep it simple. But she's a warrior woman. She believes in God, but she's not all that religious like the spy master. She's a career soldier. She's practical. She's direct. And the scene that I'm referring to is the game has this great bit of dialogue where you ask her, do you seriously want this position? And her answer is, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'd be qualified for the position, but I'd like to believe that I'd grow into the role because I want to lead with honesty and integrity. I want to be an inspiration and example to others. I want to be the sort of leader who can admit her mistakes and and shortcomings and grow with her people. I just don't know if I can actually succeed in doing that. I thought it was a very beautiful scene, and this is going perfectly off of memory, by the way, so I'm sure I'm jumbling her words, but that is how I remember it. And I thought, wow, like what a great attitude for someone who's considering being some sort of religious, spiritual leader. If it isn't totally obvious, I went with the Shield Maiden. I can't help it because that's the kind of leadership I gravitate to. I don't need my leaders to be perfect. I do need them to be humble. The sorts of people who can turn away from extremes, which exist in all of our souls. All of us have the capacity to be that way. And Jesus showed in the reading we had on Sunday, we can turn away from our extremes, our desires to be extreme, and we grow in Christ when we grow in humility and grace. And that lets us to go forth and sin no more. All right, so that was personal anecdote number 1. I couldn't bring myself to bring up a video game in church this Sunday. I just wasn't feeling it. The people, it wasn't good a vibe. But the other thing I want to talk about, again, getting the personal anecdote for this is, I was thinking about my grandpa Theal, so my mom's father. And I rarely preach about him. Grandpa Lopina, my father's father, he was the super religious one. He's come up a few times here and there. Grandpa Theal, 100% German Lutheran. He married my grandmother, 100% Polish Catholic. You can imagine the debates. In all seriousness, no, fights about religion were very rare in the Theal household, but my grandpa, he could be a very opinionated guy. I'd hear him debate with grandma about with my dad, maybe with a neighbor every so often. But he didn't treat me or the other grandchildren like that. He always spoke very gently to us and always had something to teach. If he wasn't teaching me about growing up in the Great Depression or the invention of disco music, it was how to play dominoes. Like he always had something to teach. And one of my memories of him is my grandpa loved crime drama shows, and he loved to watch them with me and explain to me how the bad guy was trying to get away with the crime and the mistakes he'd make that caused him to get caught by the police. He's like you see, Justin, he's putting the gun in the victim's hand, but he didn't wipe the entire the barrel for prints, so the police are going to catch him. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, Grandpa. I'm sure my mom would have been furious if she knew what he was teaching me. I was like 8 at the time of that. But in all seriousness, I really enjoyed my time with Grandpa, even watching crime shows when I barely understand, rules, let alone like national laws. Anyway, my point is this. I don't think my grandfather taught anyone anything about anything when he whipped himself into a frenzy of debate. He and my father would go at it about this, that, and the other thing. And I don't think either of them ever made any ground when they were like that. But when he was grounded in his humility, in his grandfatherliness, if you will, because he was a very different man as a grandfather than as a father or a father-in-law or a neighbor or whatever. But when he was humble in his grandfatherliness, he became the very model of the educator's spirit. He was informative, but more importantly, he was inspiring. He was the kind of guy that you wanted to be at his age. A guy who had been there, done that, and learned his lessons along the way, lessons he was able to pass along to others. And as I think back to Grandpa Theal, it's like he had 2 default behaviors. It was like Jekyll and Hyde, only it was Dr. Jesus and Mr. Pharisee. With me, he was Dr. Jesus 99% of the time, and I'll always be deeply grateful to him for that. And when my grandfather was Mr. Pharisee, when he'd let the extremes of his soul, which again, we all have those, when he acted on those and was just passionate and determined to win the argument, I'm not convinced he ever made any real headway. But when he was grounded in humility, grandfatherliness, and the educator's spirit, he did a great deal of good. So I think all of that comes back to what Jesus was teaching us, that when we express ourselves, it should always be with love, compassion, and understanding. And when we ourselves know that we are called to go forth and sin no more, and when we do sin, to confess those sins and always strive to be better. All right. Well, thanks for letting me get some relatively random thoughts out of my head. Wanted to get that out while I had the chance. God bless you all, and have a good remainder of the season of Lent.